Well, thank you. So, in startup growing tradition, I'd like to start off by asking you where you grew up.
Sure.
And what your earlier life was like.
Yeah, so I grew up in Newtown, Connecticut, so not super far from here, and may explain why Datto is in Connecticut, because when I moved back, the rent was free. But yeah, I always had a passion for technology. In high school, I actually got into video production a lot, and I thought for a while I wanted to be like a director for live sports on TV. And the school didn't have the equipment that I wanted, so I actually learned like TV repair and went to the dump and like repaired random TVs and things like that to build all the equipment that I wanted, like to produce live sporting events. And like, you know, hacked up these old 3/4 inch decks and put like RC car motors in them so they could fast forward and rewind really fast and all kinds of crazy things like that.
Were you selling these products?
No, it's just you would not want to sell them to anybody. But yeah, but realized that like TV is a very narrow world and like hard to move up there. So I originally went to college for electrical engineering.
Okay.
But then after going to school for a short while as an EE, kind of learned that because I was self-taught, like nothing lined up with what the course program was, and so I switched majors to bioinformatics, which I loved, but certainly didn't prepare me to start Datto, but that's what I did after that.
About what bioinformatics actually is.
Sure. Yeah, I mean it's basically just using technology to solve biological problems. So like gene sequencing, like what are the math algorithms associated with that, or how do I build better equipment to like solve that kind of problem, or how do I use, you know, to answer why ant colonies do X or Y, that type of stuff.
So it sounds like you were very motivated as a kid, but did you have like any outside influences, family, friends?
I mean, my dad ran his own civil engineering firm, granted, you know, relatively small, but I guess like when I was a little kid, I knew I wanted to be an inventor. Like I kind of always said that. Being an inventor, and so I think being an entrepreneur is probably like the closest thing to an inventor in today's sort of modern parlance.
Okay, so I guess you're at university, and you come to a realization that you want to start a business. Is that correct? Or?
No.
No. Okay.
So it's at university, and like I'm a tinkerer. Like I'm always working on some things. I made like a chair that you could drive that went really, really fast. All kinds of random stuff, but I did not do any homework. Okay. So I was graduating university with like a rockin' 2.1 GPA, which is like 0.1 above the minimum that they'll actually give you a degree for. I had very few like available job prospects to me with that, so I thought I would start a business as a way to show that I could like apply myself and do something. I knew that I would fail, but that I would certainly fail, but then it was at least, well, I had something to put on my resume that wasn't my GPA. And so that was kind of the thought process for starting Datto. Okay. And I chose the idea, like I actually have a lot of ideas, and Datto seemed like the most achievable, that I could build a NAS device that would copy data offsite.
Okay, so I guess then that leads us into the story of how Datto, you know, came about. You started with a small device, you wanted to get it off the ground and sell it to certain customers. So maybe talk about the Datto story.
Sure. It's certainly not glamorous. Like at no stage, like lots of people are expecting like some super glamorous. This is terrible. Yeah, so if you think about it, I had wrapped up 4 years of college. I had not actually graduated yet. I needed to go back because I changed majors. But I was like super not thrilled about that because Rochester is a cool place, but it's also a very cold place. And so I was just like, ugh. So I was going to start the business and see what happened. It was like my summer project. And so I decided to build this NAS that would replicate off-site. And so I was going to build my NAS out of this weird product that Linksys made at the time that I actually ripped apart, took the circuit board out, and flashed different firmware on. And then I found that if I fit it a specific way into this external hard drive enclosure, I could actually jam it in there with the hard drive. And if I use a couple of pieces of Lego, I can cover up these blocks in the back. And with a little bit of hot glue, I could get it all to fit in the box, just so. And when I screwed it together, it didn't look half bad. And so I made like one of these things over the course of the summer, and then summer came into fall, and I was like working on the code for it. And I decided I wasn't going to go back to school, and instead I was going to take night classes at WestCon to like try to finish my degree that way. Yeah, so I just kept plugging at it, and eventually I got to the point in around February of actually, it would be 2008, because I started this in the summer of 07, and I was ready to sell it, and I was going to sell it to small businesses. And I kind of imagined like my dad's business as a customer, that this would back up their servers, files would get copied onto it, and then it would make a secure copy in the cloud, which was servers in the basement. Sure, that's a secure underground facility. It's really just all how you talk about it. So that was my plan. So I created this website, and I signed up and did Google things so you could buy it online, and absolutely nothing happened. So there were 0 orders, and I thought, oh snap, I need to put it on Amazon. That was the secret. That was what I had forgotten. And so I went through the whole process to get it listed on Amazon, and did that, and also 0 orders. Nothing happened. Turns out like Datto was not like a top search in Amazon or Google. Surprise. But what I started doing is I started emailing kind of tech blogs out there, and at the time Engadget was sort of the premier of the tech blogs, or at least I felt it was. And so I sent them an email like every day for a good 60 days, until finally one of the editors at Engadget emailed me back and said, if you promise never to email me again, we will review your product. Because I'm like, oh, you should review it, and like all this stuff again and again. And each time the email was different, and like, I'm sure like his spam filter just like did not know what to do with me. But so he actually reviewed the product. I sent him one, and like he didn't notice that it was made out of Lego and hot glue, so I did a good enough job there. And they wrote reasonably positive things about it. And within an hour of that interview, or the review, going online, I had 14 orders. It just boom, and it's like, whoa. And so I quit the other part-time job that I was working to pay for kind of all the Datto stuff that I was doing, and got to soldering in a basement to fulfill the orders.
Just by yourself at the time?
So at the time I had recruited one friend of mine from high school to help me out. He had actually not gone to college and was still sort of hanging out at high school. I don't really understand what he was doing, but I was like, Dan, you're clearly not doing a lot, so you could be doing more if you help me. Dan still works at Datto, so he is officially employee numero uno. And I worked another job to pay Dan, and so that's how it worked. Dan was not going to work for free, even though he was doing nothing. Like his time still had value. He's got priorities. So I worked another job to pay Dan, but so it got rolling, and that actually created. Then I tried to get in PC Magazine. I got a lot of other blog coverage, but I realized that small businesses were buying these things, so I bought a list of small businesses, and I just started calling them. And that was terrible. I do not recommend that. So that's a soul-crushing activity. But what ended up happening is we found these other kinds of businesses out there called managed service providers, and these managed service providers do IT work for a multitude of small businesses. And in Connecticut, there's probably at least 200 of them, just for example. And so they kind of found us, and we found them, and they were like, hey, do you have a resale program? And the answer was like, no, we just want to sell direct. No, we just want to sell direct. And about like the 6th time I got answered that, I said, not right now, but check back in 4 hours. We're on it. So we created a resale program, like literally one afternoon. Like I was like, oh, let's try this. Because like, I don't know, we just didn't know what to do. So I did that, and that turned out to be one of the single best business decisions ever made. And what it did is it gave us enormous clarity of market overnight. And so it went from trying to sell to all small businesses out there, which there's zillions of, to regional managed service providers who go after customers of this specific size, etc. And then it was like, well, what media do they read, and what shows do they go to, and what events, and what are the things they care about, and this, and so you could like build on that community. And we actually had the resources to go after the managed service provider market instead of kind of the broad market as a whole.
So were these clients purchasing your product up front, and then you would produce the product afterwards? Was it cash positive?
Yeah, it had to be.
It had to be.
Well, we didn't have any funding. Because, well, so right out of school, like I tried originally to get funding, and so it's like, yeah, so I have a degree in nothing related to what I'm doing. I want to build a piece of hardware, preferably out of Lego. I have no business plan, but it's a really good opportunity. And so that turns out that is not the best pitch. So that didn't work. And like the idea, and they're like, and you want to build your own servers, and like, why would you do this? You're crazy. Which are probably true, but we just did it ourselves. And they would call and order stuff. We actually had a crazy story because we tried to push into the consumer market a little bit, and we created this product where it's actually two of them, and they sync to each other because consumers hate paying like monthly recurring bills. And so we're like, well, we'll just sell it one off, and it could be like a pair of external hard drives that you buy at Staples, and you can put one at your house and one at grandma's, and they'll stay synchronized. And so we thought, I know what we're going to do. We're going to go to the world's largest trade show and introduce this. And this was early on, it's like 2009. So we went to CES. I basically maxed out, because it turned out in 2007, as somebody in college, I was able to get $80,000 worth of credit card credit. I had 6 credit cards. And so maxed out the credit cards. Went to CES. I didn't have enough employees to man the booth, so I just asked friends to like, come, please fly out to Vegas and stand and look like you work for me. We got good traction at CES, and afterward got a call back from a distributor. It was Best Buy that was actually interested, and they wanted to do test marketing. And they said, that's great. Send us a pallet or two, and we're going to try it out in the mid-market. And they were like, how many fit on a pallet? And I was like, we're doing the math. I was like, we could probably fit about 1,600. If it's a 4-foot high, like, try it. And I was so excited. And they were like, cool, well, when can your like LTL shipment like arrive with the pallet, and we can like try this? And I was like, well, probably not long after you pay me. And they're like, no, that's not how this works. They're like, if we sell them, then you might get paid. And so that was just like a non-viable business model when you have no capital. So we returned kind of to the focus of selling to SMBs. And actually, it was not long after that trade show that the company got to the point where we were about, 2 or 3 weeks away from folding, because we were running out of money. One of the credit card companies that we had used actually went out of business, and it turns out, because it was the financial crisis, like this is 2008, right? So Advana went out of business, and you may not know this, but your credit cards have cross-default settings. So if one of them folds, all of your interest rates go to 30%. So that was nasty when you're carrying 80K credit card debt. And like living off selling boxes that are making $10 a month on some sort of recurring revenue platform that you've built. It was like really close to the end, and we knew that there was this other company out there called Zenith Infotech, and they made this product that actually went a step further than ours. And not only did it back up the data, but it could spin up the machines if they failed. But it took forever and was kind of clunky how they did it, and it was like, really, this is garbage. So we were like, maybe we'll go after them as like, that was like the last ditch effort, is we're just gonna kind of try to build a better version of what they've built. And so, by default, like we were gonna be cheaper. We knew that. But yeah, so we, that was like 3 all-nighters in a row, just like coded it, just like boom, done. And went out, and it was amazing that within 2 months of starting to sell that product, and moved out of the basement and into a real office.
Wow.
And like, yeah, it was nuts. And like the initial growth from that was huge, that we totally like hit something, and we were able to sell it into this managed service provider market that we understood. They absolutely loved it. We were selling it at like half Zenith Infotech's price, and we were making money, and it was a better product.
Were the channel partners selling it for you at the time?
Yes, that was a key to our getting started, because when you call up and you say, yeah, I'm a 22-year-old in the basement and I want all your data, like, that's not a convincing argument. But when you have a channel partner that sits in between, that, oh, well, it's Bob. I know Bob. He's been doing my IT for years. Bob says I should get this Datto thing. Like, that works. And, you know, IT Bob, he's making great margin. And, I mean, he knows that the data's encrypted and, like, there's, you know, reasonable precautions taken. So he's more willing to sort of take the risk. Yeah, so that worked. And then we ended up, like, early on, we ended up with all kinds of crazy challenges around scaling.
Yeah,
and I've got nut stories from that.
Yeah, so, well, how did you scale?
How do we scale? Painfully.
What's the kind of people that you brought on?
So I hired a head of sales, and he was really good at sort of getting the initial sales going and kind of like selling at all cost. And that's what we needed at that stage. Granted, like that would never work now in a 600-person company, but it was important then. And so he came on, hired some more developers, hired a bunch of friends from high school to help me build the boxes. And some of them also were like, dude, you can't keep the data in the basement anymore. We moved to a real data center. Like we started doing all the right things that we were supposed to do.
Technical support and stuff?
Tech support, we run all our own. Yeah, so we hired people for tech support. Although our first head of tech support actually left IT and became a nurse. It was so bad. So, like, it was so awful that we ruined IT for like other people. Like, we had a lot of challenges with the initial product getting rolling, but like it's much better now. But one of the things that's neat is when you do build a business, you can choose what's important to you, and like as long as it's legal, like you can do it. And so no, but you look at it that like your company can be unique and different. And so we decided we're going to buy lunch for everybody on Fridays because that's just what we're going to do. And our tech support, no one likes waiting on hold, so we're never going to have hold. And even now, like if you call the support at our company, you will get a human immediately. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
Are they here in America?
Yeah, no, they're in Connecticut. They're in Norwalk. Like, and half of them are in Rochester, and if you live in Europe, you'll get people in the UK. Okay. But yeah, like, but because that was important to us. And it still is. And so those things start to become what differentiates your business and what makes your company special. And so it's neat looking back because you can see how those pieces form, and they now become core tenets of what our whole company is. And it's just sort of interesting to watch things evolve like that.
Well, then let's talk about the kind of revenue growth year on year.
Yeah.
Do you have some numbers that you want to share?
Sure. So I can give you, let's see, first year was like 186,000. And that was 08 was like the first year so 07 was nothing. Yeah. 08 was 186,000, which mid 08 we made the switch to selling, or we made the switch to going after the Zenith Infotech customer. Then 09 was $1 million. Then 10 was would have been 3 million. Then 9 million. Then 25 million.
Wow.
So you get it, and you know now we just wrapped up. We're way past 100 million on the 120s.
Fantastic.
So yeah, like it's just been a crazy ride. And I'm just trying to think of like what like. We had some just ridiculous stories. Like we had one where we had our first sale ever, and we generated so much sales in that one day that the bank thought it was fraud and withheld all the money, which we still needed to build the appliances. And we called our accountant about it, and he got really, really upset. It was like, I can't believe they're doing this and this and that. And then 2 hours later, he passed away. It's terrible, but like that actually happened. Like,
Heart attack.
what? I'm not going to pass judgment. Not going to make a decision.
Is that your annual report?
No, but then like those things. So like you end up with some wild stories.
Did you get the money?
Yeah, eventually we figured, like, we went to the bank and we were like, what? Like, you can't do this? I don't know. It went up the chain and it took a lot of time, but we were able to do it. And then we changed banks. But,
Well, I was gonna ask you like about the company culture that you set up. You know, what kind of dynamic do you have with your employees?
so I think we try as much as possible to be as transparent as possible. That's really important to me. We have a couple of real values that we stand behind around that, you know, everybody should know the why, not just the what. So like, why are we doing this? Why are we working on these things? And this concept that you have to give trust to get trust. And that's a two-way street, that management has to trust that our employees are not criminals or anything, you know, like that they want to see the company succeed. And subsequently, like, you know, individual contributors have to trust that management's trying to make the right decision and like have faith. And so there's kind of a neat thing that we do, and it actually came about after we passed around 100 people. And it's interesting because you have to think about how your culture works differently as you go through different scales. And so I'll build up to kind of how you get there, in that like when you're small, say you're 10 or 15 people, every meeting that happens at the company involves the entire company. And then you reach that point where, holy crap, I'm going to have a meeting and not invite everybody. And that's like a big change to how communication works inside the business. You know, and you get there somewhere that like around 15 to 25 people, and you start to break off into little divisions and things. And then like that startup feel, as you pass like 50 people, you got to hire somebody in HR, and you know, your whole company has to go do annual sexual harassment training for the first time. And some of these things, they go, oh, is this really the same place? But then crazy, when you pass around 100 to 120 people, you get to that point where you don't know everyone. And that's just wild, because you've built this thing and you know everybody and you know what they're doing. All of a sudden you realize there are people who come to work for you for 40 plus hours a week and you don't even know their name. And like, that's intense. And it means that you really have to think hard about changing how you communicate. And so maybe before, when you had like an all hands meeting, you'd call out, great job by this guy, great job by that guy, because you know them. But you can't do that anymore, because now you're going to be picking favorites, and that's what it's going to look like, because there's all these other people who may be doing awesome things that you didn't even know about. And so one of the things that we implemented at our company that I think is really cool is we implemented this thing called anonymous questions. And so anyone at the company can submit questions to like this address. It's like a survey monkey one.
Okay.
And we promise to publish 100% of the questions asked, and we will answer 100% of the questions asked. And so that's really powerful, because it means that anybody can question without anything and anyone at the company, because you've given every single employee a voice, because you answer all of them back in a broadcast email to the entire company.
Video.
Oh, no, just in an email, like there's a written answer to every single one. And so when new hires or like new executives come on, sometimes they're terrified by that concept, because they're like, that means that my underlying staff can question my competency to you and to the entire company, and I don't even know who's questioning. And like, and they, you know, there's no line there. And it's like, yeah, that's the case. But that's how you know that, you know, you've got to do a good job, because they're there to report to like, hey, if there's an issue, or they question these things. And there have been times where like it's been painful, or like really tough questions have been asked, and have really questioned how we do things or think about things at the company. But it's been incredibly valuable. And what's cool is that our staff has been incredibly professional about it, because you could also use that as a platform to harass others, potentially. And nobody has done that, and that they respect it. And so like it's something that like I'm really proud of, and it's been a very valuable tool for measuring the sentiment of the company in a case, especially as a CEO, where you're worried that like, what if all my reports are just giving me too rosy news and I'm not really hearing the truth? You have this real ground truth.
It gives all your employees a voice too.
Yes.
Even though they might not think they have one.
Yep.
What about on the reverse side? What about them seeing you as the boss and your, like how you feel when people don't know you, they don't know you personally in your own company. For instance, like they might pass you in an elevator. You know, are they scared of you because you're the big boss? And how do you feel about that?
Well, when did you get your first elevator?
Well, if you have one, you don't
Yeah, well, we've got elevators now because they're a lot of floors and offices and stuff. I mean, it happens slowly, and like you certainly don't want people to be scared of you. And like we do new hire training like every month, and so like I personally go to the new hire training every month, and like a big part of it is like, don't be afraid of it. This is my email address. My office is located there. Yeah, I will get lunch with any single employee anytime. Like I actively work to stay accessible. And it takes work because employees come from different places and different experience, and they're not used to that. And you know, even new executives will say, "Wow, I'm just not used to this concept of like we do so much at Datto through consensus building, and like they're used to just like pushing their way through." And it's like, no. You're gonna talk to everybody and get everybody to feel good about it, and then we're gonna execute on it. But you can't just like ram it down somebody's throat because you have some title. And yeah, it's worked okay.
What about some of the, from what I've read, you do some crazy experiments in your office and you know.
I mean, I'm still the like strange tinkerer that I was when I was in high school and still want to do weird stuff. I just now have like a lot more money to do weird stuff with. So,
what's one of the?
Well, so I bought a like container for liquid nitrogen and like keep liquid nitrogen around, and I've just done all sorts of random things with that. So like just free shit on like a random so that's kind of cool. Especially too to see like what happens to a computer, and it's like the memory actually can't reset to zeros because the capacitors and the RAM chips become almost superconducting. But yeah, so way nerdy, but like really cool to see how that happens. But so like that kind of stuff. So I got big into drones and like building my own and building bigger and bigger and bigger ones. But then I got boring. Like I'd write the software that goes in the drone because that's what's fun, and then like fly them in a storm and see like, no, you need to stay exactly there. It's like all nasty and grating, and the drone's like fighting so hard, and it's like that's so cool because it's like the software, like it's all trying to figure it out. Yeah. And so most recently, like the drones got boring because like the crazy part about like the drones is that they have like the aerodynamics of like a monkey wrench, and like the computer just like does everything, you know, and just fights it and beats it. And so now I've been like playing with model airplanes recently, and like that's different because like it's just a different thing because there's like a certain elegance to like the airplane. It's like an actual design, and like you can see the math involved in it. And writing the software for that is very different, but. Yeah, I don't know. I find that stuff like fascinating to just watch like how technology can handle different diversity and different stuff. But then we built a huge LED wall at work. I built like a big battery-powered stick that has the number of petabytes, like this digital counter on it. That's like just, I don't know, like a scepter of. We have like 180 petabytes of storage, so a lot by any definition of the word. I don't know, all kinds of crazy things.
Where is all you? Sorry.
Yeah. Who do you subcontract your cloud storage?
No, we do it ourselves.
So you self-host?
Yes.
Where?
In 6 locations around the world.
I was going to ask.
Our primary location is in the East Coast of the United States in Pennsylvania. Okay. It's in Reading, Pennsylvania. We have just an enormous amount of storage there. We build all of our own equipment that does it, all the way down to we're starting to build our own switch gear and networking gear now. Believe it or not, it's all manufactured in Monroe, Connecticut, which is crazy, but like, yeah, we just made it happen that way, and we can still do that in an incredibly cost-effective way. But yeah.
But are you going anywhere to I mean, the biggest challenges in any kind of data center are power and heat.
Absolutely.
So how are you solving the power and heat problem?
I have, like, what's crazy is as your company gets bigger, and like when we were small, like I wrote code and was heavily involved with that, and now my job is all people. And you hire people that are so much smarter than you in all these specific areas and all the things they're working on. And so there are people on staff at Datto that care about the curvature of the fan blade that goes into the server and optimizing the baffle of the airflow, because if they can pull 1 watt out of a server, that saves me $10,000 a year across all my servers. And so it's that kind of stuff that's just, it's almost awe-inspiring. And sometimes, like, walking around our office, like I feel like almost like Dr. Evil when he just like opens a door and there's like, oh, there's ninjas in here. Random stuff, because like I'll be walking around and I'll like open the door and they'll be like, oh, what are you doing? There's like hundreds of fans lined up on a table and they're like measuring them all. And it's, oh, what's going on over here? And it's like, oh, well, we're, you know, testing this thing on the internet and figure we're changing the route of traffic like across the entire internet, and we're on the phone level 3 because they're not happy. But, no, when those things happen, like we got an email from Wikipedia because we use them as a bandwidth testing service, because it was like, how do you test a 10 gigabit internet circuit? And we were like, we'll just try to download Wikipedia, like the entire database from every server and see if we can saturate it. And they were not pleased. But we now have 100 gigabit of internet, and like, how do you test, how do you make sure that you actually are receiving 100 gigabit of internet traffic? Because like speedtest.net does not go up that high. So, yeah, so it's like, but those end up being like really interesting, like technical challenges to verify something like that.
So we're Reading. Where are your other 5 data centers?
So Salt Lake City, and then we have outside of Toronto, outside of London, outside of Sydney, and our newest one is in Iceland, in Keflavik, if I'm pronouncing that right.
Did you go out there?
Yes.
You gotta go out there.
Well, plus Iceland's awesome. But yeah, and their electrical costs are incredibly low there. So it's an incredibly efficient place to store data. Plus they fit underneath the EU data privacy laws. And so that becomes an increasingly important thing for us.
Okay. So let's talk about your funding rounds. You know, Series A in 2013 was 25 million, and B in November 2015 was 75 million. I guess with the revenue success you had, what was the play on these rounds?
So the Series A, I bootstrapped Datto, and what ended up happening is actually in February of 2013, a major security company, which you'd all know, came and said, hey Austin, we'd love to buy your business for $100 million. And I was the sole owner. I had not given anybody any options. I had not, it was just all me. We didn't have any debt. Like, we were doing great. And I said no. Okay. And that was like personally a super intense decision. Because the statement that gets quoted, and it's true, like my lawyer on the phone, I remember him, and he's like, Austin, you could regret this decision for the rest of your life from the beach of your own private island. And I was just like, I couldn't do it. And the reason was they love their technology, but they don't understand, like, why would you be in Norwalk, and what are we going to do? You run your own tech support? Like, all these, like, they just did not understand us as a business. And so, like, this idea that I would get some huge check and everything that I built would get dissolved except for the technology, and my team would get nothing. That just didn't seem fair.
No.
And it just wasn't what I wanted to do. And so I said no. And then the offer went up to like 120, and then I was like, this is crazy. But yeah, suddenly it changed your thinking, because you realize, like, holy shit, I'm not in it for the money anymore. And like, rarely is that like actually legitimately like you're sitting there looking at it, and it's like, wow, like, but it changes your thinking. And so at that point I realized I owe it to my team and to the company to like run the business for real. And so prior to that, I had a board of directors of 1. It was just me. We didn't do any budgeting. We didn't do any like any auditing or anything. Like, we just whatever. Well, there's money in the bank and the money's coming in and coming out. It's balancing out. But we weren't really paying a lot of attention. We weren't doing anything the way that you're supposed to be doing, because it didn't matter. We didn't care. And so it was like, all right, well, this isn't fair to the people who work here. Like, we should get real about it. And so I became more open to taking investment. And what really separated General Catalyst, because we were super picky about who we work with, was that the people that they brought forward were not bankers, but were actual people who had been there, done that. And so Paul Sagan, who was the CEO of Akamai for more than a decade and was part of sort of growing Akamai, which if you know anything about like internet infrastructure, like Akamai underpins an enormous amount of the internet. And Steve Arad, who was the CTO at VMware, who effectively like invented virtualization, like these were the people that I was going to bring on to help me grow the company and help me understand and get it right. And they have so much more perspective than like the banker guy who looks and goes, well, it'd really be great if that number was better. It's like, well, thanks, but it doesn't work that way. So after meeting with them, I said, all right, I want to do this deal, and agreed to take on the money. Because the business was profitable, I was able to take some for myself. So that's nice that it meant that like I could live like I sold the business, but still work there. So then, we committed to growing the company, and it's amazing what that advice and guidance from the VC firm has brought us. And so we were 130 employees in 2013, and we're 600 now.
Wow.
And if I didn't have their help and a lot of it is just like, it's basically like having a personal trainer and telling you like, hey, you gotta go to the gym. And like that kind of attitude of like, great, but what are your sales going to be? Because they asked me in 2013, like, what's your 2017 goal? And just the idea of writing down a revenue target in 2017, all of a sudden, like these are things that we just never did. And then it was like, okay, well now we're going to backfill, because if we want to get to there by then, we're going to need to do this and this and this, and all these pieces start to build together. And we got a real management team. Prior to that, my management team was friends of mine from high school, which they're great, but they're not really well suited to run a $100 million a year business. And so that was personally hard to some of them moved to other parts of the company, others of them left. But it was the right thing to do for all of the people who are entrusting me to put food on the table every night. And so, so that's kind of the story around the Series A. And the Series B, you look, the way that the market was trending, there was an opportunity for us to basically have a whole bunch of, I don't want to say contingent, it's almost like FU money, like we've got this that's there that we're ready, so that if there's a good opportunity to buy another business, it's there. Or if we want to get aggressive in additional market, it's there. And it buys you options. And when we were small, the only option was to sell. We had to sell whatever we had immediately right then, because we were always 4 weeks away from going out of business. And so having some money in the bank allows you to think longer term, and you can invest differently, you can look at things differently, you can expand differently. And so that was really valuable, and we were able to do it in a way that didn't substantially dilute the company. I still own more than half of the business, so I'm still a controlling shareholder. And so, it was just the right thing to do.
I saw you've got a conference event in Nashville coming up.
Yeah.
Yeah, do you want to talk about that?
So every year we bring all our resellers together that want to go, and we have an event, and we've done these conferences. This will be our 4th.
Okay.
That's actually, it's really surreal for me, because these are all of the businesses that resell our stuff. And you talk about it's weird, and the employees they might be nervous with you. At the conference, people want to take a selfie with me, and that just freaks me out. Really? No, I don't know. Yes, I'll take the selfie with you, but just it's very strange. But it's cool, and it actually helps our company, because we can, you can get as many people as possible exposed to the customer. We might bring 70 people or more to the conference, so we've got people from all different departments. They get to interact with our resellers, get to know them. We'll launch products and talk about it, and so it really is good.
You do a keynote, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's normal.
That's normal.
Yeah. No black turtleneck. You gotta, there's a limit to
What about going public, IPO, what do you do?
I mean, it's interesting. We want to make sure that we're ready and that we're doing it for the right reasons. So lots of companies go public because they need cash. We're not that. And so it's really making sure that it's something that we can take advantage of. Because there are changes when you make the decision to take the public's money. And right now, our investors are knowledgeable, smart, and willing to take long-term risk. And when you take the public's money, there's no guarantee that really any of those are true. And so you have to operate and think about things differently to serve that. And so the case and really plan at the company is how do we get things ready, which helps you run a good, efficient business of, you think it's really just sort of like taking the budgeting and financial planning to kind of the whole next level. And those things are good, but it's not something that, for me as an entrepreneur, is like a calling. And so like for some entrepreneurs, they wake up and this idea that they go down there and they would push the button, which I recently found out at NASDAQ it doesn't exist. But they would be there and just have to clap for 2 minutes. Yeah, that they would go do that. Like that's important to them. Like it's a life moment. And for me, it's not what drives me to come to work. What drives me to come to work are first and foremost the amazing people that we've hired and gotten together that are so much smarter than I am, that won't let me commit any code because my code is terrible. Build great product, and the customers and like our impact that we've had, that like we've saved businesses like around the globe, and it's like every day. And like that's so much more meaningful to me than standing there in front of a button I can't push. So that's kind of just, I don't know, I feel like I have perhaps a different perspective than some other entrepreneurs. Not to say that theirs is wrong, it's just, that's how I view it.
Okay. Well, unless you have anything you'd like to add, I guess I'll ask the audience a few questions.
Sure.
Sure. Anyone? Q&A? Yes, Ahmed.
I have 2 questions.
Fire away.
Why the name Datto?
Data and Ditto.
Alright, that was it.
And Domino was taken. That was actually the original name I wanted to call it.
Second, we have 600 employees. Why still use the reseller program and not just go B2B?
Because I have thousands of resellers. So, and of my 600 employees, I look, a third of them are dev, a third of them are support, and then sales fits in as a slice between sales and G&A, fits in that last third. So I have an incredibly efficient go-to-market process, and it means that I have a reseller reselling my product in every state in the country, all across. There's the country with the highest number of Datto appliances per capita is Greenland. There's somebody reselling Datto appliances in Greenland. And like I would never build out a direct sales team to go after the Greenland market, but someone else has found that like that makes a lot of sense, and you gain this huge multiplier effect, and so it is absolutely worth it.
Yes.
So I actually have a question, like how do you think of luck, like in the whole process, how you build this startup? And then out of luck, what kind of element from the journey that would be valuable for the entrepreneurs here that's repeatable for their journey?
So there's a quote by a Supreme Court justice that I can't name, so I'm going to like totally also butcher this quote. But basically his thing was that like he believed that his success came from luck, but that he most often found luck at 3 a.m. in the law library. And so like I would think that the same is true in running a business, that like much of Datto's success could be attributed to luck, but if you're not present and trying, you would never have been there to capture the luck in the first place. And so it takes an enormous amount of effort to get lucky. Might be the other way to paraphrase it. And I think that that's the case. And so I can think of some examples about technology that we chose in the beginning that ended up being incredibly smart decisions that enabled us to grow very rapidly, that we had no idea that we were getting so lucky in making the right choice. As far as repeatable decisions that another startup could take, I think it's the biggest thing that I would say is to focus on delivering your product or service to your people and to not get overburdened with the business plan or the fundraising or all of these other things that model there, that like that's the reason why you're in business and what you're doing, like that part matters. And like if you look, it really is just like revenue cures all evils. And so if you focus on revenue, you can use your revenue to cover all of or many of your mistakes. And so like in Datto's beginning, we made tons of mistakes in how we ran and operated the business, but we were able to build a profitable business and we're able to use that money to fix the mistakes that we've made. And I think a lot of people are terrified of making mistakes in starting a company, and instead accept that you're going to make mistakes and hope to grow large enough such that you can fix them.
Since taking VC money, have you adopted an equity incentive plan for the employees?
Yes.
Why the change?
Well, after sitting in a situation where I could have received this outsized windfall and my employees would have received nothing, that didn't feel fair to me. And so after taking VC money, like actually required me to establish a cap table, like all of the things rather than just like the book, and I gave myself 10 shares out of the little book. Like, and actually like do it for real. That process, like I had a vehicle to do so. And we option out every single employee who works at the company because we want them to be participants in our success. And while that means that I have given up my share to do that, I still think it's fair because there are people at Datto who work arguably harder than I do for Datto's success every day, and they should have an opportunity to share in that success.
Follow on to that, if you're not public, how do they become liquid in their equity?
They hope we go public.
Which actually reverts to the earlier point of like, is it going to be too much for you to not go public or go or exit?
Well, so there's other options. I mean, I'm being kind of facetious there. That like you can buy the shares back. You can offer to buy them.
Sure.
Which is a way to achieve liquidity. There could be a sale of the business, which could achieve liquidity. There are a lot of different ways in which you can do that. And there are lots of non-public businesses that have employee incentive programs that still utilize shares. Or they could try to sell their shares to a third party, and there's ways they can do that too, even if they're not public. There's a whole second market. We'd prefer it if they didn't do that, but
yeah, you got to be careful with that.
yeah, no, and it depends on how you draft your shareholder agreement, and
Yes, permitted transfer.
oh yeah, all kinds of fun stuff.
Right.
Hi, Johan. In the event that the boxes fail, do you guys service those machines or you leave that to the service providers?
So if they die, like we'll replace them for free. And that's something that we always stood behind. And it actually turned out that all those devices made out of Lego, they all overheated and died over the course of 2 years. So I have all of them.
Lego now.
But everything's built like much better. That's something that we made a decision to stand behind our product, and so if there's issues with it, we'll absolutely stand behind it.
Do you guys have a service organization that services those machines? Or?
So they come back to our manufacturing facility, and they'll be either refurbed or parts will come out. Like there's a whole process around that. And I mean, that's one of those things where it's amazing how things that are one-off when you're small become enormous operations when you're large. So buy one of our devices, say you bought a 10 terabyte appliance and you set it up and you're going to have your servers back up and then it's going to sync to the cloud. Well, turns out to sync 10 terabytes over the internet, if you have like a regular size internet connection, will take forever. So we'll ship you either a NAS or USB hard drives to do that. And so that was like our plan. It's like, oh, this is simple. Well, it turns out now we receive over a petabyte of data per month through the mail. And like the amount of process that has to be put around that, and then like designing the packaging for the box to ship the hard drive. Like, turns out a consumer hard drive can only go through the mail about 7 times before it's garbage. But like, these are the things that you learn. And if anything, like that's one of the parts that's like fun about coming to work, is that you learn new stuff about random things all the time. We recently had this area underneath our staircase that we built, and we were trying to figure out what to fill it with, and we were going to fill it with like pinballs, but it turns out that they're like really expensive. So there's actually a company called Craig's Balls. Like these are real things, and they're like, he had a special on 9/16 inch balls. That it was a manufacturing overrun. So if you're in the market to purchase ball bearings, like I bought 188,900 of them. Yeah, and then found out that we couldn't add too many more because we reached the floor loading for the building. It's actually very heavy. But so like that's just in the last month. I now know about ball bearing grades and purchasing, and then Craig is very proud to have also provided the Mythbusters their balls. But yeah, like that's what's cool though about being an entrepreneur, is that like everything's new and different, and you can choose what you get involved in.
And as you continue to grow, you're going to leave your manufacturing in the U.S.?
So as long as we can do it cheaper, absolutely, and we've been incredibly efficient at it and continue to get better at it. So there's no foreseeable reason why we would leave. We can more tightly control the quality by building it ourselves. And so that's really important to us, because people are entrusting us with all of their data. And so we have to hold ourselves to a very high quality standard. And the same thing, like it doesn't take too many software bugs before somebody goes, I don't trust this box. And it may actually not be a hardware problem, but they want a new box. And so we need to be able to replace those quickly and efficiently, and have enough on hand that if there's a hurricane, we can send out tons of them. Which like we had to do during Hurricane Sandy. And so by manufacturing them ourselves, we can control the process end to end.
Thank you.
Robert.
Well, I was actually going to ask a related question. You mentioned 2 things, the call center in Connecticut, some of the manufacturing that's happening in Connecticut, and both of those kind of run counter to conventional wisdom. And I just wondered, there's this conventional wisdom that manufacturers dying in Connecticut, or the labor costs are high in Connecticut. I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about some of the surprising things you learned about the business environment in Connecticut.
I mean, like it's tough. Like we endeavor to pay people a fair wage, and we build our business around, that. And so like our support technicians are paid a good wage, and our manufacturing groups paid a good wage, and like the cost on labor in building an appliance, that's not the biggest cost. It's obviously the parts, and like signing that efficiently, like we can get savings other places. And instead, what we found that we get a lot of intrinsic benefit by having our support team next to our engineering team. That gives our engineering team real incentive to not make support's job terrible, because they're going to hear about it all day. But there's huge benefit to that, and the fact that there's there's definitely ways that we could do it cheaper, but we don't want to. Like, that's not how I want to run the business. And like part of the benefit is that when you're the CEO, like you can make those choices. And so we made a choice that we wanted to keep support internal. And I'm going to tell you that I think that it's better because of that. And I think that we provide fantastic support, and we hire incredibly skilled people, and we teach them an enormous amount, and we invest in them, and they move up in our company, and they know that this is how they get to move up in the company. And so it matters a lot. And somebody could probably find some counter argument that I could get a more skilled employee somewhere else, etc. And that may be right, but it's like you get to make those choices. And so we weren't afraid to make those choices, and it's part of who we are. And bringing support in, and we think about support as a critical part of what we sell. So yes, there's a ton of technology that's awesome, but without the support behind it, we're really not nearly a very good product. You need that other piece, because it's not that they couldn't do it, but when there's a disaster, someone's calling and they want someone on the phone right away. And they want someone to help them through, because they're like, oh my God, my server just crashed, or my building burned down, or my hospital was taken out by a tornado. Like those are real things that happen, and that somebody's there to answer the phone, that knows what's going on, that's connected, that could, talk to an engineer, that could do all the pieces, and that's part of who we are. And so you just make it part of who you are. And I think on the Connecticut factor, you can find the talent you need in Connecticut. It's here. You may have to search a little more, but if you build a good business and you treat people fairly, that talent sticks around and it wants to grow with your company. And if anything, we see that our engineers, our support techs, our salespeople, they don't want to go anywhere. They are happy at the company and they want to grow with it, and they see that opportunity, and that's hugely valuable, which you might not get in a market like Silicon Valley, where there's always the grass is greener somewhere, and it's very hard to keep your talent.
Governance, can you talk about your board?
Sure. I control the board, so I have more independence than there are investor seats. I've chosen I look for a diverse group of people who approach things differently. So I've got Paul Sagan and Steve Harrod, who I mentioned, and then I have Ted Kuhns from TCV, and he has enormous value in sort of understanding our market inside and out, has great market knowledge. And then on the independent side, I have a former audit partner to run our audit committee, which is sort of standard. And then, and he's a guy by the name Pat Gray, who's a great guy. And then I have Ursula Burns, who's the CEO of Xerox, who provides a very different perspective than anybody else on my board. And that's really valuable, because it's just, you want the right dynamic there. And then finally, I actually, I have a slot for another independent, but right now it's actually filled by my brother. I don't know, it's actually, it works well, and he works for us in our product team, and he's a good balancing force inside the company, and just interesting to see how that works.
2 to 7?
Yeah, that'd be correct, and 4 of mine, yeah. Yes?
So you speak a lot about culture and the value you place in making the company a good, great place to be.
Yeah.
And a big part of that is dressing up and your hair fights. So what I'm curious about is, you guys are heavily intertwined with your heavily controversy. So how was the experience of being exposed in that manner, and kind of the security thing, and how maybe too much culture or too much FBI programming? So just a little bit about that.
So I mean, that was really interesting.
Yeah.
And I think I'm certainly not ashamed of our culture. And from a security standpoint, we follow best practices and we care an enormous amount about it. It's unfortunate because I think the story is not about us, but instead is about, potentially this other person and what's going on there, and to try to make them look bad in any way possible. From our side, it was interesting to realize that we were involved in it, and we knew when the Platte River name became public, because we knew they were a reseller of ours. But we were able to work with everybody and got permission, because there's a whole question of what's going on, and got permission to hand over the information to FBI, and so that's fine. But because you have fun at work doesn't mean you don't take your job seriously, and I think that most people can see the difference between the two. And if you look at, there were a bunch of pictures that got published in an article, they had to comb through 3 years worth of stuff and actually crop out different things to try to push a point of view. And so it's amazing and interesting how somebody can tailor what you put online to push a point of view. But I don't think that we're certainly not going to change who we are, because we have to go to work and we have to love what we do, and like we're gonna have fun doing it. And at no point I think were we irresponsible, or any of the actions that you see there show we're putting people's data at risk. And I look at the professionals that come to work every day at Datto, and we take our job really seriously. We have thousands and thousands of businesses that rely on us. And so maybe I don't see it as much as somebody outside might see it, but it's just like I know how seriously we take our job. And I think our resellers do, and I don't know, I'm not worried about it.
Last one, Judd.
What keeps you up at night?
Velocity. So when you're small, right, you're worried about the big guys that are going to come step on you. And your advantage is that you really only have to think maybe a month out, because you can change and move and do different things. Oh, we have a reseller program tomorrow, that type of stuff. Whereas when you're larger, you can't. I'd have to notify 600 people about a change in our resale policies, and how we deal with this, and how will it affect sales commission plans, and how does it work in the UK, and is it legal in the UK? Like, there's just literally layers of stuff. And so as you get larger, my fear is that we lose our ability to move quickly. And what that means then is that you have to be able to see the future better. And I am shitty at predicting the future. And so I don't want to be at that point where, in order for my company to be successful, I have to know what the market's going to look like 2 years from now. No. That's scary to me, because the odds that my guess is right are much lower than what is the market going to look like 6 months from now. So a lot of what I spend a lot of time on is how do we work as a business to be able to move quickly, even though we're large. And we've had some really good success there, and we've done some things that are sort of unique to us, and how we operate, and how our teams operate, and how we communicate. And we've told our employees, hey, things at Datto are chaotic, and everything will be changing all the time, and you're just going to have to deal with it. And so it's making some of those decisions and willing to go at points and say, look, we're not going to create 9 review committees. We're going to trust that our employees are smart. And actually, there's literally Bill Spears right there that convinced me to set that up, that he was talking about a previous job where they created a bunch of committees because some employee made a mistake, and that they're going to create all these gatekeepers to prevent that, instead of just going, we should prevent employees from making mistakes. Make sure that our employees understand the gravity of their choices. And so it's those types of things that we try to do to try to create as few barriers as possible. And so it's interesting to think through those, especially as you look as we're a company that's trying to operate as though we're a public company and get everything in line. And those two, on the surface, appear to be very juxtaposed. And so we spend a lot of time thinking about creative ways where we can achieve both. I spend a lot of time fighting for that and working on that, so that Datto can stay fast and we can keep our velocity.
All right, well, thank you all for coming. Look out for our next event in March, and could you all put your hands together for Austin?